Kabbalah sees the events of life not in terms of the physical external details, but through the frame of the underlying forces that are at work in our development, in our spiritual development. That there is a goal, the goal is known, and so are the forces known, and how they work on us. And they are apparent on every level of life, including on the social global level and the physical, political events of human society. And there's a maxim that says in Kabbalah, no light without a vessel. There has to be a need in order for the light and the change to occur. And all development happens not through some kind of effulgence of light that just comes on everything and takes it over with no action on the part of the created being. It is a need that brings about the light. It is a question or a doubt or an absolute hunger, a necessity that evokes a response. And the response is always good. And it's also that light that evokes the need in us. It provides for the growth of this need so that it can answer it with good. Let's go back to 9/11. Maybe let's go back even further to 1995, which is the date which the Zohar says that a completely new reality would happen. And what the Zohar meant was that this force of development that had been developing us, which is the egoistic force that saw the expansion of material wealth, of material science, the materialization of religious ideals, the building of society on the fulfillment of the individual, all of these things that did us a great deal of good and were extremely useful and necessary for a certain period of time, they were all happening in order to bring us to a huge state where we could then develop the kind of need, the kind of vessel that would bring us to a much higher and very different opposite state of being, opposite way of being. So if we want to understand what's going on in any event, we need to look at the sensation that it evokes. Not the details of the event, but what need it evokes in us. Now, most of us didn't notice this 1995 border. But after that point, the egoistic force of development stopped functioning. It wasn't needed anymore. And many of our institutions started to silently and slowly implode. But it didn't become clear to us until 9/11. In 9/11, the story was that there are terrorists, people who don't care at all about life and death, about the border between life and death, don't care about the material aspect of life, care about the ideal that they have, right or wrong. They still acted as a catalyst to point out that we had crossed a border from using the egoistic form of development into what? What were we supposed to work towards now? If the great monuments of our civilization, monuments to money, monuments to imperial power, to dominance in world trade, and all these things that are natural to everybody, if we're not going to progress that way, by what will we progress? The clue was in that event. To the degree that the terrorists don't care about the border between life and death, and it's not about the material success, but about the spiritual success, even though that remained undefined for us in that event and in that moment. We therefore were left with some kind of an open space And we had to begin to determine on what basis we were going to evolve. We were all confused by this event. First of all, we were very united after it happened. There was a sense of feeling the experience of others. We were gathered together in a sensation of awe, because underlying this 9/11 destructive event was an awesomeness of the spiritual magnitude of what our life really is, and especially what it isn't. But we lost this very quickly because we didn't have the right need. All we had was a kind of an insight, a sensation that put us in touch with this. But we couldn't change anything at that point because we didn't understand, or we actually couldn't believe what we were experiencing. And we tried to go back to living life, to finding peace and solace in the past. But that was not possible because that evolutionary force stopped moving. And because of that, our attempt to fix our problem, we took all the wrong steps. We went to war in different places to try to punish who? I mean, the ultimate author of that event is a force of nature developing us as a whole toward a spiritual outcome. But we held on to the materialization of blame and so on. We tried to reestablish our way of life and just go back to the past, but we couldn't, because the material force on which we based all of our financial ideas, the way that society should relate to one another, how we would trade and benefit each other, it stopped. We saw we had no trust any longer in each other. And money is just a token of trust. The connection between us was broken, and we failed to see that. And we failed to act because we didn't know how to act. So the need is growing in us, and the sensation of confusion is growing in us. And we saw that the new generations that came in and reached adulthood at this period of time didn't want any of the things that my generation, had wanted in the past, and they couldn't actually get anything out of taking those approaches. They couldn't buy homes. They didn't want to work in the sorts of jobs that we did, and the jobs were not available, and the education that we were giving them was an education for the past and had nothing to do with the type of true intelligence and work, spiritual work, though unrecognized, that was coming for us. We simply weren't training people for the right thing, but we couldn't believe our own sensations, and we didn't know where to turn. But that's also part of this whole plan. The depth of needed to grow to such a degree that an enormous light of change would be able to enter. And we would be able to feel it and act on it because it's what we asked for. And yet we delayed and brought on crisis upon crisis. So the next crisis is a crisis of borders. It's a kind of invasion of the West, necessitated by our dragging our feet. We needed to understand that our integrity was not about the physical borders, but our integrity had to do with our connection to the forces of nature and the places where they wanted to guide us. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't have borders or any of those things, and I'm not making a political statement or argument here. But the reason that the borders are attacked is because we do not know how to relate and include and identify with humanity as a whole. And because we don't know how to do that through integrity, all of the walls needed to be breached. But they're not physical walls or physical borders. They are the definition of self that is, nature is asking us to reconsider and to build in a different way. So all of that becomes the basis of our political war, because it's trying to answer the question brought up by the sensations that we've all been sharing. But the answers are still coming from the material force of development. So 9/11 was the dematerialization of life. That life should not be defined by that material force. And now we have the burning of Notre Dame Cathedral. And this is about the dematerialization of our spiritual religious tendency. We're one being. A place of worship is a place in which we experience the connection to all people. It's not a small game. It's not a part-time thing. It needs to be the basis of our life. That is, the force that is now going to develop us, rather than being a receptive force about filling ourselves, it's going to be a force of altruism. It's going to be a force of giving. And this is not a random thing, but it's not a material thing either. It has to be guided by learning to achieve a place where our heart's desire is to give. We have to learn a completely different nature. And it is the space between us, the fact that we don't see ourselves as a single being and take care of each other in that way and wish to learn how to actually live in this non-material state, that have allowed all of these flames to come in. But the only thing that was burned was our approach. Not us, not the place where we can actually gather, because the place that we're going to gather is not material. Humanity is a single soul, created as a single being, and it experiences itself in a broken form. Our spiritual tendency, spirituality, is the reconnection of all of humanity as an inner sensation of being part of this system of being in relation to a single force, which is the Creator. A place of prayer is really a place of connection. Connection is prayer. So the reconstruction of the Notre Dame Cathedral is the same as the building of the Third Temple. It's not something that is about life or death. It's not a place in time and space. It's a quality of altruism and identification with others as the self. It is love your friend as yourself. It's not pie in the sky. It is precisely where these events that are leading us, where the force that we see, the disappointments, the heartbreak, and the sensation that we feel in relation to old ways of being, it's precisely the vessel that is being created for us in order to let this enormous light of connection in. In the first place, if we understand that we have this in common, that is where we're going, and that our deepest need is to understand how we can do that, then we can reconstruct the place of connection, worship for the whole soul of humanity. Now, we've all heard, love your friend as yourself. Now's the time to take it seriously. We have to learn how to do this. We need an integral form of education. We have to give our new generation the kind of input and information which is about how life works and how to live it for your own well-being and for the well-being of everyone else. Not as some kind of detached ideal, but as the purpose of our life. Our economy, our sense of development, and all of that have to be based on that single ideal. That's what our heritage originally was in the West, and that's where it is for the world as a whole. These warring factions are actually connected in the original thought of creation, in our patriarch Abraham. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, They came from the same thing and they're going to the same thing. But it's our responsibility where we are to find it in our own tradition and to go beyond that. So now you can understand that maxim, no light without a vessel. It's dark, it hurts, it's big, but imagine the light that's opposite it.